You already know who I'm talking about. There's a specific person who just came to mind the second I said that. Someone who always seems fine on the surface but leaves you feeling empty every single time. You walk away from them and something feels off, like you just lost an hour of your life and got absolutely nothing back. You've been trying to figure out what's wrong with this dynamic for months, maybe longer, and nobody around you seems to see it the way you do. Here's what I'm going to tell you today. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to explain yourself. One quiet shift, and they'll remove themselves. Let me show you exactly what's been happening, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've been shrinking yourself around this person. Not all at once, gradually. You stopped bringing up certain topics because you knew how they'd react. You started choosing your words more carefully. You laughed at things that weren't funny. You showed up when you didn't want to, said yes when you meant no, and kept the peace when every part of you wanted to say something real. And what did you get for it? Nothing changed. It never does. Here's the part that's going to make you uncomfortable, because it's not really about them. Not yet. It's about what your behavior has been silently communicating to them this entire time. Toxic people don't pick their targets randomly. They are wired, consciously or not, to find people who will absorb them. People who feel responsible for other people's emotions. People who apologize first, even when they did nothing wrong. People who would rather feel guilty than feel disliked. Think about the last time you tried to pull back from this person. Maybe you took longer to reply. Maybe you said no to something small. What happened? They didn't just accept it. They made you feel it. A cold response, a guilt trip, suddenly acting like you'd done something terrible, and quietly, without even realizing it, you adjusted. You softened. You came back. They noticed. They always do. This is the trap. The more you accommodate them, the more space they take. The more space they take, the more exhausted you become. The more exhausted you become, the harder it feels to do anything about it. That's not weakness. That's exactly how this dynamic is designed to work. But here's what nobody tells you, and this is the part that changes everything. Toxic people don't actually leave because you fight them. They don't leave because you expose them or cut them off dramatically. They leave because the environment you create around yourself stops working for them. And you have complete control over that environment, starting right now. Here's the shift nobody prepares you for. You've been thinking about this wrong the entire time. You've been asking yourself, how do I get them to treat me better? How do I make them understand? How do I fix this? Wrong questions, all of them. Because you cannot fix a person who doesn't think they're broken. You cannot reason with someone who uses your reasoning against you. And you cannot win a game that was rigged before you even sat down. So stop trying to change them. That chapter is over. What actually makes toxic people leave isn't a confrontation. It isn't an ultimatum. It isn't even cutting them off. It's something they can't argue with, can't guilt trip you out of, and can't manipulate their way around. It's called becoming unavailable. Not physically, but energetically. And it starts the moment you stop being easy. Think about what made you useful to them in the first place. You were responsive. You were available. You absorbed their moods without complaint. You filled the silence when things got uncomfortable. You smoothed things over when they created friction. You were, in every sense of the word, convenient. Convenience is what toxic people feed on. Not love, not friendship, not loyalty, convenience. The moment you become inconvenient, the moment your presence costs them more effort than it returns, they move on. Not because you drove them away, because you stopped being a resource. And here's the brutal part, the part most people can't accept at first. This means the relationship was never really about you. It was about what you provided, your attention, your patience, your willingness to stay. The second those things become harder to extract, the whole dynamic collapses. And what collapses wasn't real to begin with. Let that settle for a second. You didn't lose a friend. You lost an arrangement. And the grief you feel, that real, heavy grief, isn't for them. It's for the version of them you believed in, the one you were still hoping would show up. That person was never coming. But now, you finally know that. And knowing it changes everything. Because here's what happens next. When you stop shrinking, when you stop absorbing, when you stop making yourself convenient, something shifts in the room. They feel it before they can name it. You become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to manipulate, and toxic people are deeply uncomfortable around people they cannot read. They don't know how to operate without that access. So they do one of two things. They escalate, or they quietly disappear. Either way, you win. So what does this actually look like in real life? It doesn't look like a dramatic speech. It doesn't look like blocking them on everything or sending a long message explaining why you're done. That's still performing for them, just in a different direction. What it actually looks like is quieter than you think. And it starts with one decision you make privately, inside yourself, before you ever change a single external behavior. You decide they no longer have access to the real you, not the surface version. They can have that. The polite replies, the occasional small talk, the neutral presence. But the real you, your actual thoughts, your vulnerabilities, the things you're working through, the dreams you haven't told many people about, that part goes completely off limits. Not as punishment, not as a power move, simply because they haven't earned it and they never will. Watch what happens when you do this consistently. The first thing you'll notice is they start pushing. They'll ask more personal questions than usual. They'll try to create situations where you open up, a moment of fake vulnerability from their side, a manufactured crisis, a sudden warmth that feels almost real. This is them recalibrating. They can sense the access closing, and they're testing to see if they can reopen it. Here's what most people get wrong at this exact moment. They feel the warmth, and they soften. They think, maybe I was wrong about them. Maybe they're changing. Don't. That warmth is a technique, not a transformation. Stay the course. The second thing you'll notice, and this is where it gets interesting, is that they start losing interest. Slowly at first. The texts come a little less frequently. The invitations dry up. The dynamic that used to feel so suffocating starts to feel like it's thinning out. Because without access to your energy, there's nothing for them to feed on. And a toxic person with nothing to feed on does not stay. They find a new environment, a new person who hasn't learned this yet. And they leave, not dramatically, not with a big confrontation, but quietly, the way they always operate. Like they were never really there. And you'll feel something unexpected in that silence, not sadness, relief,